What happens when arrogance collides with dignity? In a high-end restaurant, the air thick with wealth and power, a billionaire CEO thought he could humiliate a young black waitress. He spoke to her in French, mocking, dismissive, and certain she wouldn't understand a word. But seconds later, she answered back, fluently, and in that moment, the entire room froze. This is the story of the night a waitress turned the tables on one of the most powerful men in Europe. The restaurant was alive with the quiet hum of conversation, the soft clinking of silverware, and the warm glow of low-hanging lamps. It was a kind of place where businessmen sealed deals, families celebrated anniversaries, and young couples nervously sipped wine while learning how to belong. Behind the counter, Maya moved gracefully between tables. At 27, she had worked her way through college waiting tables, and though her degree hung framed in her modest apartment, the city had yet to grant her the career she deserved. Still, she carried herself with dignity. Her crisp white shirt was pressed, her apron spotless, and her smile, when she chose to show it, was calm and professional. But on this particular night, a storm was waiting to break. The heavy glass door swung open, letting in a rush of cool evening air and the sharp sound of polished leather shoes against the floor. A man walked in, tall and broad-shouldered, his tailored suit radiating money and power. The maitre d', flustered, hurried to greet him. "Bonsoir, Monsieur Dupont," he said, bowing slightly. So that was him, Jean-Luc Dupont, CEO of one of Europe's largest investment firms. A man whose name was whispered in finance circles with both admiration and fear. He had flown into the city to finalize an acquisition rumored to be worth billions. People said he was ruthless, a perfectionist who tolerated nothing less than excellence. The maitre d' led him to a prime table near the window, overlooking the city lights. Two assistants trailed behind, tablets in hand, scribbling notes, whispering updates. From the kitchen doorway, Maya caught glimpses of them. She had seen powerful men before, but there was something sharper, colder about this one. He carried himself as if the world was his boardroom and everyone else were pawns. When she approached his table, pen and notepad ready, she greeted him warmly. "Good evening. May I start you with something to drink?" Dupont looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. Instead of answering in English, he spoke in rapid French. The words cut through the air, sharp, impatient, dismissive. Maya understood every syllable, but she didn't reveal it. Not yet. To the rest of the dining room, it sounded elegant, foreign, and unintelligible. To Maya, it sounded insulting. He wasn't ordering a drink. He was belittling her. He called her incompetent, suggested she was wasting his time, and muttered something about standards in this country. His assistant smirked, though they didn't seem to follow every word either. Maya's grip on her pen tightened, but her face remained calm. Years of dealing with difficult customers had trained her well. She simply nodded, writing nothing on her pad, then excused herself quietly. From behind the counter, she could feel the eyes of other diners. They had noticed the sharp tone, the arrogance dripping from his voice. A woman at table 6 leaned toward her husband, whispering. A young man by the bar shook his head in disbelief, but none of them knew what was really said. Maya did. In the kitchen, she leaned against the wall, closed her eyes for a moment. Her co-worker, James, noticed her expression. "You okay?" he asked. She gave a small smile. "Fine. Just another night." But inside, a decision was forming. She had promised herself long ago not to let ignorance or arrogance define her. And tonight, she would remind herself, and maybe this entire restaurant, that respect is not given by power. It is commanded by truth. When she returned to the dining room, the CEO was still talking, gesturing grandly with his hands as his assistants typed furiously. He looked at her again, this time impatient. More French, more sharp commands. Louder now, so everyone nearby could hear the frustration in his tone. Maya stood still, her notepad against her apron, her dark eyes locked onto his. The restaurant seemed too quiet, the air heavy with anticipation. The maitre d' shifted uncomfortably, sensing tension but unsure how to intervene. This was the moment. Maya's lips parted, but she did not speak in English. She answered him, in fluent, precise, Parisian French. Her pronunciation was flawless, her tone calm, deliberate, and authoritative. The words slid into the air like a blade unsheathed. Every head nearby turned. The assistants froze mid-typing. Dupont himself blinked, the confidence in his eyes faltering as he realized the truth. The woman he had dismissed so easily had just met him on his own battlefield, and she had matched him, word for word. The silence that followed was electric. For a long, suspended second, the restaurant seemed frozen in time. The sound of Maya's fluent French echoed across the room, clean and confident. No one could pretend they hadn't heard it. Jean-Luc Dupont, a man accustomed to control, felt it slipping. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing, as if searching for a crack in her composure. But Maya stood rooted, shoulders squared, gaze unflinching. She had answered his insult, and she had done it in his own language. The assistants lowered their eyes to their screens, suddenly fascinated by the glow of their tablets. Around the room, guests leaned subtly toward the scene. They weren't sure what was happening, but they knew they were witnessing something rare. The fall of arrogance, the rise of dignity. Dupont broke the silence first. He leaned back in his chair, lips pressed in, and replied in French again. This time his words were slower, deliberate. He wasn't insulting her anymore. He was testing her. "Where did you learn?" he asked. Maya's reply came steady. "At the Sorbonne. I lived in Paris for 3 years. I studied, I worked, I listened, I learned." Her French was fluid, elegant, not the language of a tourist, not even that of a casual speaker. This was the voice of someone who had absorbed the culture, earned her fluency, and carried it with quiet pride. Gasps whispered through the dining room. People who had once looked at her as just a waitress now saw something entirely different. Dupont's fingers drummed against the polished wood of the table. He wasn't used to being challenged, least of all in public. But there was no denying what he had heard. His arrogance had backfired. "Alors," he muttered under his breath. Then louder in English, "Bring me a glass of Bordeaux." And the menu. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't rush. She simply nodded, collected the menus, and returned moments later with the wine. She poured carefully, gracefully, never once breaking eye contact. When the crimson liquid filled the glass, Dupont lifted it, swirling it between his fingers. He studied her as he might study a business rival, calculating, reassessing. Something in his expression shifted. The mockery was gone. In its place was respect, grudging but undeniable. "You surprise me," he said at last. Maya tilted her head, her voice calm. "People often surprise you if you give them the chance." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Around them, the diners who had witnessed the exchange felt the sting of truth. Too often, the powerful underestimated those who served, mistaking silence for ignorance and uniform for invisibility. Tonight, that illusion had shattered. The rest of the meal passed without incident. Dupont ordered, ate, and discussed with his assistants in quieter tones. Maya served each course with the same professional composure, but her presence now carried an undeniable gravity. Each time she passed the table, whispers rose among the guests. By the time the plates were cleared, the story had already spread across the restaurant. The CEO, who had mocked the waitress in French, only to be humbled by her perfect reply, was now the subject of every hushed conversation. When Dupont stood to leave, he paused by Maya's station. His tall frame cast a shadow across the floor. For a moment, the tension returned, but this time his voice was low, almost respectful. "You have talent," he said, "more than most in this room." He slipped a card onto the counter, sleek, embossed, the kind only CEOs carried. "If you ever decide waiting tables isn't enough, call me." Maya glanced at the card but didn't reach for it. Her answer was measured. Respect doesn't come from titles or money. It comes from how you treat people. Remember that. Dupont studied her, then gave the smallest of nods. Without another word, he turned and strode out, his entourage following close behind. The doors closed behind him, and for the first time all night, the restaurant exhaled. Applause broke out, not loud but steady and heartfelt. Maya blinked, surprised, as customers at nearby tables clapped softly, raising their glasses toward her. Even the maitre d', usually so stiff, gave her a nod of admiration. James, her co-worker, leaned over with a grin. "You just schooled the most powerful man in the room," he whispered. Maya smiled faintly. "No," she said, gathering the menus. "I just reminded him that power doesn't excuse disrespect." She slipped the CEO's card into her apron pocket. Not as an opportunity, but as a reminder that dignity cannot be bought or crushed by arrogance. That night, as she walked home beneath the glow of street lamps, Maya replayed the scene in her mind. She thought of her years in Paris, the long hours of study, the people who had doubted her, and the barriers she had broken silently. And she realized something profound. Her greatest strength wasn't just her knowledge or her language skills, but her ability to stay calm in the face of arrogance and to let truth speak louder than pride. Somewhere in the city, Jean-Luc Dupont was likely nursing a bruised ego. But perhaps, just perhaps, he would remember the black waitress who spoke flawless French, and the lesson she gave him without ever raising her voice. And if he forgot, the diners who witnessed it never would. They would tell the story again and again, each time with the same awe. The night the CEO yelled in French, and the waitress answered back, fluently,